Hi, happy Tuesday. It is Tuesday Tea with Kim, and we're spilling the tea. That just means that we are talking about health. We're breaking down myths. We are helping you to understand what's holding your health up. And I want you to be the CEO of your health. I want you to be the CEO of your body, to know not only what, but why and how, right? I want you to understand that, because I say always, when we know better, we do better. But the other part of that is that if you understand it well enough, then you're going to take that information and you're going to take it to your circle of friends, your family, and you're going to share what I'm sharing, and we're going to have a big ripple effect. And nothing makes me more excited than that, because I can only reach so many people. But you sharing it, going back and telling people, you making changes for the people that you have an influence with, and them seeing you doing the do and getting healthier, that's how we make a ripple effect. So one thing, I've been excited to talk about this. I actually did a little deep dive. I've kind of been in the weeds about this, and I am going to share when I actually do the part, the caption of this, I will share some of the studies that I looked at. But I think that it's safe to say that when we talk about losing weight, that we're really talking about losing fat. I mean, nobody wants to lose their muscle, right? Nobody wants to, have these skinny little legs that don't have any muscle on them. We really want to lose fat. But everything that we've heard of in the past has been eat less, move more, and really all that your focus is should be about how many calories you're burning, how many you're taking in, how many you're burning, and what that calorie deficit is. You absolutely need a calorie deficit. I'm not saying that you don't, but that is so simplistic about how our bodies are responding to the environment that they're in right now. And that environment is all the toxins in the air, all the toxins in our water, all the toxins in our food, the preservatives, the seed oils, it's everywhere. And so our bodies, with their calories and that sort of thing, is functioning in a completely different environment than it ever has before. So it can't be that simplistic to turn on that fat burning again. It can't be that simplistic to finally get over and start losing weight. It can't be that simplistic to stabilize our blood sugar and to stop that insulin resistance that we have going on. And that's going on from not only how we eat, but what we eat and the environment that our bodies are living in. So I wanted to start with that. But when we're over 40, so let's add age to the environment that we're in. And most of my audience is women over 40. Certainly anything that I say applies to men as well, because this interesting thing happens as men age and they start to get, their hormones change as well. And they start to maybe add on some adipose tissues, some fat tissue. That testosterone, in the presence of more sub-Q fat, actually aromatizes or turns into estrogen. So hormone balance is important, but it's more than our sex hormones. That's what everybody wants to talk about. Sorry, I had lunch. That's what everybody wants to focus on and talk about, but it is so much more than just estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. That little tidbit that I gave you about testosterone turning into estrogen in the presence of fat as men age was just a little bonus. All right. So when we're over 40, all bets are off. Our bodies don't really respond the same way that they have in the past. That's why if you're doing the same things that you used to do when you were 20 and nothing's working, first of all, our environment is not the same as it was 20 years ago, and your body's not the same as it was 20 years ago. So we got to give ourselves a little grace, but we have to figure out what the difference is, and we have to support our bodies the way that they're working now. So when you calorie restrict, you burn muscle. So those, anybody that watched The Biggest Loser and those sorts of things, those people changed their metabolic composition. And what they did is they actually lost more muscle than they lost fat. And so that tanks your metabolism. But if you just do calorie restriction only, you're going to lose muscle. If you do calorie restriction and increase your cardio, you're going to lose muscle and your cortisol levels are going to go up. Now, I'm talking about women in menopause or perimenopause, or men that are in that same time frame, because your body is stressed, and it's going to convert that. When you release cortisol, it's going to convert that stored glucose into glucose that's in your bloodstream. It's going to stimulate your pancreas to release insulin. And then you're going to, once insulin is involved, your body stops burning fat and it starts storing fat immediately. You cannot burn fat and store fat at the same time. And whenever insulin is present in your bloodstream, you are storing fat only. You are not burning fat. Okay. So one thing that kind of got, or like me, same, Sarah, yes. So the thing that got me going, and I will share the studies that I looked at, was a study that said, and it was a meta-analysis. And if you know what that is, it's basically not an original study, but it's a study that looks at studies that have already been done. And it kind of summarizes all of the information, and it tries to see if it can extrapolate new information out of looking at these individual studies as a group. That's a meta-analysis. So the meta-analysis was looking at studies that looked at if you, and we're going to assume several things here. So we're going to assume that people are only eating 3 meals a day, all right? That they're not snacking in between, but they're eating 3 meals a day. And we're going to assume that in the first group, these people are going to be exercising 20 minutes before they eat that meal. That's one group. Second group is going to be eating just those 3 meals, and they're going to be exercising 20 minutes, going for a walk, 20 minutes after that meal. And then a third group was going to exercise 2 minutes every 30 minutes throughout the day, regardless of meals, but they're still only going to eat those 3 meals a day. So, sorry, I have something in my tooth. So everybody is exercising 60 minutes a day. And by exercise, now some of these studies said a light jog. Some of these studies were just walking. And then some of the studies were doing like body weight exercises. But across the board, the findings were the same. So what it showed is that the group that had the best blood sugar control was the group that moved 2 minutes every 30 minutes throughout the day. And here's why. So the group that moved 60 minutes, but before meals, they actually had better blood sugar control than the control group. But we're not comparing it to the control group. And the control group is people that just ate and didn't exercise. We're comparing it to the 2 other groups. So the group that exercised after they ate had better blood sugar control. And the reason being is because when you exercise your muscles, you're burning calories in those muscles, and they actually act like a sponge. So they kind of pull the blood sugar out of the bloodstream and you put it into the muscle without using a whole lot of insulin to do that. So that's how you have better blood sugar control. But here's what happened when you had better blood sugar control with the group that exercised 2 minutes every 30 minutes throughout the day for a total of 60 minutes. Because they didn't just lower their blood sugar. It wasn't just their muscles acting like a sponge to take in that excess blood sugar. they actually had a better hormonal response in their body because they became more insulin sensitive. They needed less insulin overall to manage their blood sugar, and they stayed in a metabolic state where fat burning was actually allowed to continue. So why does that happen? Here's one of the reasons that it happens. We have to remember what hormone receptors are and what they do. So hormones are messengers in the body. They send their chemical messengers. So they go from one area of the body to another area of the body, and they tell that recipient area of the body what to do. And so insulin is a hormone, and it has these receptors that kind of sit like this, if you will. I'm holding my phone, so I want you to imagine that my elbow is sitting on the surface of the cell, the membrane of the cell, and this is the receptor. So you can see when that receptor is out and it's off the surface of the membrane that the insulin is able to easily find that receptor and to do its job. And its job is to bind with that receptor and then cause a gate to open in the cell so that the glucose can go into the cell. That's how it works. As your body spikes its blood sugar, you have you're eating multiple times throughout the day, so your blood sugar's constantly up and down. Your pancreas is constantly releasing insulin. Or if you have those blood sugar spikes where your insulin overcompensates and it releases a huge amount of insulin, every time, imagine that insulin is heavy. So every time that insulin lands on that receptor, it kind of gets driven down into the cell membrane a little bit more. So eventually, it's kind of sitting just like this on top of the cell membrane. So let's add in the fact that the environment that our bodies are in right now, that we have toxins, that we have crap food, we have, preservatives, and, all the GMOs, like all of that going on, that leads to inflammation in our body. And so that causes the membrane of our cells to swell a little bit. So now you have this sitting on the surface of the membrane, and the membrane is kind of swelling around it. So more and more that receptor gets pushed down into the membrane of the cell. And so now, even to control the blood sugar a little bit, you have to release more and more insulin because it kind of has to dig down into the membrane in order to find the receptor. That is insulin resistance. And so what happens when you're exercising all throughout the day, you're actually causing that receptor to be a little more prominent on the surface of the cell so that a small amount of insulin causes the good result that we want, where we offload that blood sugar out of our bloodstream and into the cell. So I talked about, let me just make sure I didn't miss anything. No. So when you are exercising for 2 minutes, every 30 minutes throughout the day, that you are changing how those hormones actually communicate with the body, with the cell. And that's why your blood sugar is under better control. But it's not because your muscles have acted like a sponge. It's actually because those receptors are more proud and you have better communication. When we talk about hormones, what do we always talk about? We always talk about hormone balance because it's never really just a single number of what one hormone is. It's how all the hormones communicate with each other in this metabolic loop in order for your body to function most appropriately. So when you're exercising every 30 minutes, you are keeping that blood sugar stable over a longer period of time. And that's why you have better insulin sensitivity. That's why you have better blood glucose control. So one other thing that I wanted to talk about, and it kind of came out, not in these studies, but as I was kind of researching to do this live, we think, and I used to think too, so I'm raising my hand, we think that if we do intermittent fasting, that what controls our fat burning in our bodies is the fact that we haven't been putting glucose into our bodies. That isn't necessarily true. It will to a point. Once you've been fasting for a period of time, you will start to burn fat, but that's because of ketosis. And that is a much shorter window of fat burning, and it's harder to get into. Simply because there are fail-safe mechanisms. It's essentially starving. So there are fail-safe mechanisms that our body has to keep that from happening. So you're kind of fighting with your body a little bit to keep that from happening. And in this environment that our bodies are in, when we have this constant low-grade stress all the time, we have this constant low-grade cortisol circulating all the time, and what it's doing is it's releasing that glycogen that's stored in the liver, in the muscle cells. It's releasing it, and it's not allowing your body to hold on to that, so that your blood sugar is constantly being elevated by converting this storage glucose into blood glucose. And so I learned this because I started using a Lumen device. I was thinking that anytime after 12 hours you start fat burning, and it might take a little bit longer for some people, but certainly at 16 hours you are fat burning. And that isn't necessarily true, because if you've gone too long for your body and now you've stimulated that cortisol release, you are actually pumping up your blood sugar, and you're not in fat burning anyway. Your cells prefer to burn fat. That's how our ancestors lived. When we ate locally, when we ate in season, when we ate what we killed, when we were hunter-gatherers instead of an agricultural society, and we had this excess of food that we grew, and we had these crops, and we had sort of monocrops where we started eating the same food all the time. Before that happened, and we're talking centuries ago, before that happened, our cells knew how to burn fat. And the way that it burned fat was that when we went through these periods of famine where we weren't getting calories, maybe for days we weren't getting calories, our bodies would tap into their fat reserve and they would burn that fat. But a couple of things have to happen. When we burn fat in our cells, it does a couple of things. First of all, it provides 4 times the amount of energy, ATP, for that cell. Number 2 is that it burns clean. When we burn glucose, we have a lot of byproducts. It's like burning dirty fuel in our cells. We have a lot of byproducts of that energy being produced. And so it's kind of like your carburetor. You know, when a car in front of you is smoking, that's exactly what's happening inside of our cells when we are constantly using insulin and we are constantly burning glucose in our cells. So a couple of things have to happen in order for you to kind of flip that switch and retrain your cells how to burn fat. The first one is that insulin has to be low. So you have to learn how to balance your blood sugars. You have to learn how to control your blood sugars. You can do that by balancing the macros that are on your plate, going periods in between eating, only eating for about an 8 to 10 hour window during the day, fasting overnight, no late night eating, those sorts of things. Keeping a check on your calories to make sure that you're not in a calorie excess. Blood sugar must also be stable. So insulin must be low and blood sugar must be stable. And remember, those two things do not necessarily mean the same thing, because your blood sugar can be spiked by cortisol and stress. So if you didn't sleep well the night before, your blood sugar might be out of balance because you're having those cortisol spikes throughout the day. Cortisol must be regulated, and that is going to go back to our lifestyle. That's going to go, number one is going to be sleep. Number two is going to be getting out of that fight or flight mode. We have to, slow down, take our time, take deep breaths, those kinds of things in order to lower that stress. We also have to start eating cleaner because cortisol is also going to be released when our body is inflamed and when our immune system is activated. That can happen from a leaky gut. That can happen from trash that we're eating, a bad diet, all of that. And then our mitochondria must be supported. So our mitochondria are these, we think of powerhouses as kind of these tough things, but in our cells, we have these little powerhouses, and those powerhouses are kind of fragile. And like I said, when they're burning glucose, the byproducts that are produced from burning glucose in the cells actually damage the mitochondria. And all of that soot and trash and all of that builds up in the cell. So it actually slows down those hormonal messages that are going on inside of the cell, and it interrupts our hormone balance that way. We also produce these oxidative products from burning glucose, and those actually cause our internal bodies to rust. So you can imagine if oxygen gets to metal, it causes it to rust. Same thing happens on the inside of our bodies, and that's when we're burning glucose. Also, another thing happens, it's called products of glycation, or essentially we sugarcoat the inside of our bodies when we burn glucose. And all of those will damage the mitochondria. So now, instead of producing 1/4 the amount of energy from glucose as fat, it's actually producing less than that. And then muscle must be maintained. You have got to maintain your muscle mass. So those severe calorie restriction diets, like the America's Greatest Loser, those kinds of things, those people actually damage their metabolism more than what they were before when they were fat, because they've lost all of their muscle, and muscle is metabolically active. Muscle burns calories 24/7. Even if we're sedentary, it's still burning calories. So if you are of the mindset that I'm just not going to eat, I'm going to restrict my calories to 300 or 400 calories a day, it's going to backfire. You're going to lose your muscle. You're going to be burning this dirty fuel. You're going to be spiking your blood sugars. You're going to be under stress. You're going to have all this trash in your cells. And that's why we don't lose weight. That's why we don't, our bodies are resistant. That every calorie that we put in our mouth, our body saves because it thinks it's under attack by what we're doing. It thinks it's starving to death. It thinks that it's in this toxic environment, and it is. It doesn't trust you. It doesn't know when you're going to feed it or what you're going to feed it. So that's why we are in the situation that we are in now, where we have these we can't lose weight no matter what. And it's like, I'm eating less than I ever did, and I'm gaining weight on 600 calories a day. Well, yeah, you've probably lost a lot of your muscle, and you don't have any place for that blood sugar to go. And you're burning glucose, and you're burning that as a dirty fuel. So, one of the easiest ways in order to do all of those things, lower your insulin, stabilize your blood sugar, lower your cortisol, support your mitochondria, and to maintain your muscle mass, is through small movements throughout the day. So we're talking 2 minutes at a time, every 30 minutes throughout the day. I'm going to start doing this, and I will report back to you and let you know. You know that I go to the gym and I work out for an hour, 4 or 5 days a week. So I'm going to keep doing that. This is going to be one small thing that I add to what I'm doing. And you can walk at a brisk pace for 2 minutes. You can go up and down stairs. You can do some squats. You could do some sit-ups. You could do some wall push-ups. You could do a plank. You could do whatever it is that is resistance or a little bit of cardio during those 2 minutes is totally fine. So when your muscles, even just for 2 minutes, when you work your muscles, even just for 2 minutes, you pull the sugar out of the bloodstream, and you don't need insulin to do that. So that's going to keep your insulin low. When your insulin is low, your body has permission, gives itself permission to burn fat. When you do this consistently, your cells are going to be retrained so that they know they are flexible. They're metabolically flexible so that when you have carbohydrates or when you have glucose in your bloodstream, it burns glucose. And when you don't have that, it immediately switches to, instead of shutting down, it immediately switches to burning fat. So let me break this down just with a quick analogy. Your bloodstream is like a highway. And I wrote this down just so that I can remember. When you eat, sugar floods in like rush hour traffic. And if you're sitting still, it jams up. Insulin has to come in like a traffic cop to direct the chaos. But if you're moving, even a little bit. So think about a traffic jam when it's just nobody's moving, you haven't moved in 20 minutes. Or versus that traffic jam where you might be going less than 1 mile an hour, but you're moving, you're getting somewhere. It's a different story, right? It's a different kind of traffic jam. It feels different. Same thing happens in your body. So if you're moving just a little bit, exits are opening up. And so that blood sugar is actually getting into the muscles without insulin. So it's a different story. So just that 2 minutes every 30 minutes throughout the day can make a huge difference in your metabolic health. Your metabolic health is what we're talking about. So, and you know, I hear it all the time, and I was the same way, honestly. I was like, I am working out. All right. I am working out. I am eating as clean as I know how. I am eating less calories than I ever have, and I am still gaining weight. And it's this reason why. Is because we need to stop being sedentary for hours and hours and hours and hours at a time and take those 2-minute breaks and just move so that we can move some of that glucose out of the bloodstream into the muscles without spiking our insulin. All right. So you don't have to starve yourself to burn fat. You need to train your cells, lower your insulin, regulate your stress, support your mitochondria, and move often. You don't have to move hard or fast or any of that. You just have to move. 2 minutes at a time, every 30 minutes. So I hope that this helps someone. If you are going to jump on the bandwagon with me, I want you to shout out below and we can hold each other accountable.